Yo, what's up? When it comes to being the smartest animals, we humans definitely got every other species beat. But what about strength? Sure, you might be the strongest guy, but are you chimpanzee strong? Gorilla strong? Donkey Kong strong? Well, through a very scientific and completely infallible process, I've been able to figure out just how much every ape could bench press, including the largest, now extinct great ape to ever exist. Really quickly, if you're wondering how I calculated it, basically, found the average male body's weight multiplied by the percentage of skeletal muscle, of type 2 muscles multiply into the all graph that by the weight of the body. Gorilla dicks are only 5 centimeters long, who knew? And that's how I calculated it. But if you want all my research, you can find it in the description below. And that's research with heavy quotation marks. All you really need to know though is that there was a lot of assuming and estimating to finding these numbers. Anyway, let's set our baseline with the average man. Wait, no, I mean the average American man. He stands at 5'9", weighs 200 pounds, and is borderline obese. He is also able to bench 135 pounds untrained, but with consistent training and diet, he can bench a very achievable and respectable 215 pounds. And with our baseline set, let's start with the smallest great ape, the bonobo. You might not have heard of these guys, because I certainly haven't, but they're basically just smaller chimpanzees. The average male is going to weigh about 86 pounds and be about 3'9" tall standing up straight, which is coincidentally about the height of the average Filipino. Even though they are very small animals, an untrained bonobo is still able to put up 111 pounds, and after being trained, are able to bench around 178 pounds. Already an amazing weight for such a small animal, although they are still short of the human bench. That is not the case with the next ape, the chimpanzee. Even though your average chimp is only going to weigh 132 pounds and stand at around 5 feet tall, they put up a very impressive 169 pounds, and that's before training. With training, you can expect the average chimp to bench 270 pounds, which already blows most human lifters out of the water, including me. Next, we have the orangutans. You know how in the solar system, the first 4 planets are small as fuck? And then you go to Jupiter and you're like, holy moly, this is a sizable planet? No? Okay, well, I did when I was a kid. And anyway, this whole analogy is to say that orangutans are basically Jupiter. They're the first big-ass apes. These guys can get up as much as 285 pounds and are also 5 foot tall standing up. Although after humans, these guys do have the weakest pound-for-pound muscles. But they still land a respectable untrained bench of 217 pounds and a trained bench of 347. Next, the gorilla, who as you could imagine is extremely strong. The largest male gorillas are going to tip the scale at 500 pounds and stand at 6 foot tall. Now while the untrained gorilla can already put up a ridiculous 550 pounds, a trained gorilla can max out at 880 pounds. And to give you scale, that is the weight of about 4 Patty Pimblets. Okay, off-season Patty Pimblets. Alright, next we have Donkey Kong, who is also technically a gorilla, but he is a giant among gorillas. Standing at 7'10", Jesus, I know he has back pain, and weighing 800 pounds, Donkey Kong is benching an astounding 880 pounds his first time under a bar, and 1,400 pounds after some training, which is about the weight of the average male buffalo. That being said, Donkey Kong did also literally punch the moon out of orbit, so maybe he can bench a little more than that. Anyway, finally the biggest ape, the baddest ape, the strongest, and a nightmare for anyone with a lisp to pronounce, Gigantolopithecus blacki. So this was an ape that was around about 100,000 years ago, before our ancestors either directly or indirectly killed it or fucked it to death. Nah, I'm kidding. It was probably an ice age that took them out. Anyway, they stood at around 10 feet tall and weighed about 13,000 pounds. They were also closely related to orangutans, which means that they were gingers. Anyway, Gigantolopithecus was probably able to bench a mind-boggling 1,000 pounds, and with training, could get just over 16,000 pounds on the bar. And so there you have it. So the next time you're under the bar, feeling weak, do that extra rep to outlift your fellow apes. Like and subscribe. Hey, yo, what's up? Ever wondered what type of crazy things are going on in secret government programs? I mean, you got the Manhattan Project, which literally created the nuclear bomb. You got MK Ultra, where the CIA fed a bunch of college students acid and yelled at them. And yeah, that was a little less productive. It just created a lot of traumatized college students in the Unabomber. But my point stands. Secret government projects can be crazy. And with that being said, these are some of the stupidest declassified government programs I could find. Alright, flashback to 1960s America, where there's one thing Americans hate to their core. The gays! No, I mean, yeah, but there was another thing. Minorities! No, Okay, I mean communists. Americans hated communism. Also, at the same time, Indonesian President Sukarno loved communism. So the Yankees decided to try to seduce Sukarno with capitalism. But Sukarno wasn't into it, and he was still messing around with those dirty commies. So the CIA got to scheming. How could they bring down Sukarno? That's right, blackmailing him with a scandalous porno featuring Sukarno. Genius. The original plan was to get a Sukarno lookalike to get to raw dogging on camera, but apparently they couldn't find a lookalike, so they just put a latex mask on some random fella and had him go to town. The expectation was once the general Indonesian public saw the porno, they would all collectively hate Sukarno and then love capitalism because of the porno. I don't get the logic either, but they made the film and showed it to Sukarno, only for it to completely backfire. In fact, Sukarno was said to have liked the film so much, he asked for multiple copies to bring back home and watch. And this is how I imagine that going. Listen, man, for the last time, stop messing with those commies. Yeah, or what? Or this. Oh my god. That's right. My dick is like 10 inches in this. Exactly. Wait, what? Yeah, and this stroking motion, it's hypnotizing. Anyway, moving on, it's World War II, and you want to invent a self-guiding missile. But you don't want to use a computer to help aim the missile because... And with that reasoning, renowned psychologist B.F. Skinner strapped a pigeon into a missile and hoped for the best. The idea was that they would put a picture in front of the pigeon and have him peck at the target, which would guide the entire missile. Now, despite what you might think, Skinner was able to get an almost 100% result with the pigeon missiles. And the only reason the plan was shelved was because they figured out the nuclear bomb around this time. Actually, that and the fact that despite the pigeon missile's effectiveness, the whole thing was pretty impractical since Skinner basically made a glorified pigeon suicide bomber and would need a constant rotation of pigeons to throw into these missiles. Alright, so 16th century Spain has a problem. At the time, they were one of the fastest growing empires, and they had started looking at China with its rich culture, expansive history, and deeply rooted religious beliefs. And they thought to themselves, damn, this shit is ass. They're not Christian or Hispanic. See, the way the Spanish took over and colonized foreign kingdoms was killing the ruling class and then marrying into the general native population until everyone was part Spanish. And then they would just rule over all the Hispanics, which is basically what they did in the Americas. So when the Spanish came over to China, they figured they would just use the same strategy on the Chinese. Problem with that is that there's a lot of fucking Chinese people. By some estimates, at that time, for every one Spanish man, there were 20 Chinese women. And that's assuming that every single Spanish man went through the massive, arduous effort of dropping everything and giving up his normal life in Spain just to go to China and have a massive orgy with 20 Chinese women. I know, what a pain. Anyway, the whole plan fell through when the Spanish realized that they really weren't going to put a dent into the Chinese population, and probably were going to end up losing Spanishmen into the Sea of Chinese. Alright, so this next one is my personal favorite. So it's 1960s America, again, and this time Americans are trying to figure out a way to discreetly eavesdrop on the Soviets. And so came Operation Acoustic Kitty. Yeah, you could probably tell from the name, but they basically got some extremely unlucky cat surgery, which implanted a microphone into its body, so that it could transmit any audio it heard back to the Americans wirelessly. And after an hour-long procedure and $20 million, yes, $20 million, that cat should have gotten Obamacare.
Hello, my fellow Americans.
The kitten was ready for its mission, so they readied its equipment, made sure everything was working, and sent him near the embassy, and... yeah, but it's fine because at least that cat had 8 other lives to do whatever it is that cats do. I hope you enjoyed. What would you do if you were the ruler of the Roman Empire? Would you work tirelessly to raise the standard of living and lead your empire into its next golden age? Or would you spend all your time doing the historical equivalent of snorting coke and banging hookers? To be honest, I think most of us would land somewhere in between these two. But even those of you who think you just become the most hedonistic coke-fueled emperors still probably have nothing on the debauchery of Caligula. And if you do, you should probably see a therapist because this guy was really screwed up. So Caligula was born in the year 12 to a loving family who all got systematically slaughtered because of a man named Tiberius, aka the Emperor of Rome, and also technically Caligula's great uncle. Well, actually not everyone died because Caligula's sister was also lucky enough to not get spawn killed by Tiberius. Anyway, Caligula was about 19 when Tiberius, the guy who literally murdered his entire family, invited Caligula to live with him in his palace. Now obviously, Caligula wasn't too fond of the guy, but he didn't have much of a choice, so he just sat around and watched as Tiberius did Tiberius things. Like one of his favorite hobbies was having massive orgies with kids and then throwing said kids off cliffs cliffs once he was done with them. Yeah, Tiberius was like ancient Rome's Jeffrey Epstein. He even had his own island too. Anyway, so Tiberius eventually started to take a liking to Caligula. So much so that he allowed Caligula to start hosting his own orgies. They grow up so fast. Anyway, a few years later, Tiberius ended up kicking the bucket, and one possible reason that he died is Caligula still wasn't all too fond of the guy, so... And with Tiberius gone, Caligula was now the man on the throne. So, for the first few months, Caligula was actually a really good emperor. His big thing was giving everybody free bread and gladiator games, which made everyone in Rome fall in love with the guy. Especially since their last emperor was the guy who was throwing little kids off cliffs. And I mean, Caligula did do the same thing, but hey, he gave out free bread, right? Anyway, eventually the good times ended when Caligula got really sick. He was on the brink of death and running a fever for a month, which means he basically had the equivalent of his brain in a microwave for an entire month straight. And because of that, when Caligula got back, he was acting a little out of pocket. For one, since at this point in Caligula's reign, everyone still loves him, some of the senators were going up to Roman gods and saying stuff like, "I wish I could trade my life to save Caligula from death," and things of that nature. So when Caligula does end up surviving and heard what all these senators were saying, he called all these senators together and was like, "Hey guys, thanks for all the kind wishes and all, but I'm still here, so..." And then every senator who was called was forced to commit suicide, which I don't really think counts as committing suicide anymore if they were forced to commit suicide. I think they were just murdered at that point, but yeah. So this is when shit started to hit the fan, basically. So one time, when someone asked an oracle if Caligula would ever become emperor, the oracle responded that Caligula would no more become emperor, that he would drive his chariot across the Bay of Baia, which was basically the old-timey way of saying, no, he's not going to become emperor. But then Caligula did become emperor, albeit through less than honorable ways. So once he got finished with the senators, he decided to get every single boat in Rome and make this humongous bridge just so he could ride his horse across it for 2 days straight. Anyway, one of Caligula's favorite habits was that he would crash weddings, say he wanted the bride, then he would smash the bride on her wedding, and then the next day he said he didn't want her anymore and leave. Some other stuff he did, in no particular order of grotesqueness, is he threw razors with underage boys and girls, for old time's sake I guess. He also made the remaining senators walk beside his chariot at events to degrade them. He also married his sister, which is like the tamest thing he's done so far, and apparently he was so madly in love with her that he paraded her everywhere he went. But then his sis ended up dying, and Caligula completely lost his mind. So he forced everyone in Rome to pray for her like she's a god, and then later named his daughter after her. "Daddy, how did I get my name?" Oh, funny story. Basically me and my sister. So after his sister/wife died, Caligula got back on the dating market, probably also scaring away almost all of Rome's females out of the dating market. But he ended up meeting Milonia, who is just as psychotic and messed up as he was. Like, for example, one of the ways he would flirt with her was that he'd be like, "I can cut your throat right now." And she'd be like, "Oh my god, you're so cute, stop it." And honestly, reading this gave me hope because there really is someone out there for everybody, guys. Don't lose hope. Anyway, now that Caligula had conquered the world of dating, it was time for him to conquer the world through military conquest. His goal was to take over Britain, which at the time no Roman emperor could seem to do. Anyway, Caligula decided he would be the first Roman emperor to change that. So Caligula gathered all the troops and resources and set off to make his mark in history. But when he actually got to the beach that would take him to Britain, he was like, fuck that. And instead had all his soldiers collect seashells and bring them back to Rome as spoils of a great victory. Caligula also eventually started balding, and he started to become very insecure about this. And Caligula wouldn't have this issue if it wasn't for today's video sponsor, Keeps. No, I'm kidding. Maybe one day though. But anyway, Caligula actually was going bald. And this is before you could take a weekend holiday to Turkey to fix your hairline. So after talking it over with his therapist, Caligula figured the most healthy way of self-acceptance was that every time he goes parading down Rome and saw someone with a full head of hair, he would forcefully shave it on the spot. Also, another time, Caligula wanted to sacrifice a bull for a ritual, but instead of killing the bull, he just bludgeoned the guy that was holding down the bull, just cuz. Another time, there was some gladiator game going on, and there was wild animals in the middle fighting. And because they ran out of prisoners to throw at these animals, Caligula just threw the entire bottom row of spectators in. Anyway, it turns out all the things Caligula was up to was not very conducive to being well liked by the people of Rome, because in the year of 41, Caligula got assassinated along with his wife and daughter, and so ended the reign of Caligula. I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking and subscribing.
Yo, what's up? It's really hard to get bored these days. I mean, if I have some free time, or honestly if there's any window of time where I have to live with my own thoughts, I'll instantly suppress them by switching to TikTok, YouTube, or Netflix. But what would you do if you had no internet? Or pretty much anything except for corn and tractors? Such was the dilemma of the average child from the American Midwest in the 1920s. I mean, according to Google, the most exciting thing happening in the Midwest in the 1920s was the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. But as you can imagine, the weekly cross-burning must have been pretty boring after the first couple weeks. So they had to find their own fun. And they did because of one Alvin Shipwreck Kelly, who got his nickname because he survived 5 shipwrecks, 2 airplane accidents, 3 automobile accidents, and a train wreck. Which at some point, it has to start being his fault. But anyway, one day, either because of a dare or just a publicity stunt, Alvin decided to sit on top of a telephone pole where he sat for 13 hours. And then every Midwesterner boy had a new hobby. So the whole fad was that these little kids would climb up these telephone poles, and then they would just sit up there as long as they could. The kid would have runners that would provide him with food and water while he sat up there and... No, yeah, he just sat up there. If you think this sounds like a rather boring sport, keep in mind that these kids really didn't have much to do. I mean, here's a picture of one William Rupert, who, as you can tell from the black tar of presumably shit and piss, has been up there for quite a while. 23 days to be exact. Although that's far from the world record of 439 days and 11 hours from Alabama resident H. David Werder. Now you might be wondering why. Why would someone spend like a significant percentage of their life sitting up on a telephone pole? Maybe he just wanted to say he beat the world record? Well, no. Or maybe he just really enjoyed pole sitting? Oh, okay, not that pole. Anyway, no, that wasn't the reason. No, David decided to sit up there for over a year in protest of gas prices. Although my personal theory is that he was just trying to get away from Alabama. Alright, so it's 1960s America. Pointy bras are all the rage. Everyone's listening to the Beatles. And generally, people are having a great time. Unless you were black. Or JFK. Anyway, another thing everybody loved during this time was getting high. You had acid, weed, whatever else. All these drugs are illegal, and at the time the law did not play with drug charges. But that was until the American youth found out about bananadyne. So the idea was that you would dry out a banana peel and smoke it, and then you would get super high. Now don't start hang drying all your banana peels, because this doesn't actually do anything to get you high, or really anything in general. And bananadyne isn't even like a real substance, they just made that up. But this just goes to show that we as a society should make weed legal. Because if not, kids are just going to be doing the next best thing, which usually means smoking whatever is smokable, or boofing pills up their ass. Alright, this next one is the reason I decided to make this whole video in the first place. So, in the 1550s, the Dutch were introduced to the tulip. Now, to the untrained eye, a tulip is nothing more than just a flower, or something you use to make a dye in Minecraft. But if you're a 16th century Dutchman, not only would a tulip bulb be the most valuable thing you've ever seen, you'd probably cut off an arm, a leg, just to say you own a tulip. So over the course of 80 years, let me say that again, 80 years, tulip bulbs were one of the most expensive luxury items being traded in the Dutch economy. Which, like, okay, the Dutch are, like, they're pretty irrelevant these days, right? But back in the day, they were literally one of the biggest economies. I mean, I think I understand why they're not the biggest economy anymore. But yeah, for 80 years straight, people would literally trade acres of land, entire companies, all for a tulip bulb. Eventually, people started drawing up contracts, which would represent trading the tulip, which means people were trading things for these contracts with absolutely no backing to them, since the tulip wasn't even actually there. Which is ridiculous. That's like if people today traded absolutely worthless virtual coins that had absolutely no backing behind them. I mean, that's... What the fuck? That's so out there, right? I lost all my money on Dogecoin, guys. It's not a joke. And for 80 years, everybody in this fucking country continued partaking in whatever the hell this was. Because this isn't like economics anymore. But yeah, everyone kept on doing this until one day, in February of 1637, one Dutchman was like, wait a minute, I don't know about this whole tulip thing. And within the month, entire banks were wiped out, entire family funds were literally vanished, and people lost livelihoods over this. But this begs the question, what could a tulip actually buy you if you were around during the peak of tulip mania? So for one tulip bulb, you could get your hands on a lot of wheat and rye, 4 ox, 8 pigs, 12 sheeps, all of which are morbidly obese, which is a good thing, a hogshead of wine, which, probably a lot. That probably means a lot. 4 tons of beer, 2 more tons of butter, and 1,000 pounds of cheese. That was just the food. We're not done yet. An entire bed, a suit of clothes, and a silver drinking cup, all for a flower. And finally, in my personal opinion, the weirdest fad of all time, the ornamental hermit. So the French and the English elite wanted a unique way to decorate all the land that they owned, and so came the ornamental hermit. Basically, rich people paid some homeless old guy to live on their land. And aside from providing the rich people with advice and his guests with some entertainment, all this hermit had to do was sit there. And yeah, that was it. Sounds like a pretty easy life until you consider the fact that these hermits were forbidden from ever leaving their part of the garden and going into real civilization. And if they were ever seen anywhere outside of the garden, they would be immediately fired. So basically, these old guys were forced to live in isolation and were all probably going insane because of no human contact, which is like the last person I would want to take advice from. Hey, hear ye, guys. Listen up, guys. This guy, my little hermit guy here, he's a riot, okay? This guy's great, all right? Come out, man. Come out. Come on. Tell us something, man. You should all kill yourselves. Oh my god, I love that guy. I love that guy. And those were some of the dumbest fads throughout history. So I hope you enjoyed. Please consider liking and subscribing. Yo, what's up? The American military is a force to be reckoned with. And no branch of our military is as feared as the Navy. But back during the Revolutionary War, our Navy was ass. Like, if I'm being honest, our naval encounters against the British should have been a complete wipeout if it was not for one man. John Paul Jones. So John Paul, no Jones yet, that happens later, was born into Kirkcudbright in Scotland. He started his naval career on a ship called the Friendship, which was a slave ship. So for the next couple years, John Paul Jones ferried around Africa and the West Indies, until eventually, John came to the conclusion that slavery is not that cool, and instead decided to work on a ship called the John. Basically, during one journey inside the John, the captain of the John died, but lucky for John's crew, John was able to fill the role of the captain and successfully sail back to Scotland, where John was awarded for his ability to lead the John. And so the owner of the John made John the new captain of the John. And all was going well for John. He now had his own crew and his own ship. And he was able to carry out a couple successful voyages. That was until, hey John, what's good, man? Up top. Okay, yeah. Hey man, quick question. And I'm just throwing this out there, but I was wondering if you'd be okay with paying us a little earlier next voyage? Sure, man. Here, I'll get your payment right now. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, man, I was worried about you getting mad if I bought this up to you. It's really cool you're not mad at me or something. Oh, you're mad. I'm mad. John Paul Jones was arrested when he got back to Scotland for this, but he posted bail and got out. Although now everybody in Scotland hated him. Not because he killed a guy for asking for early pay, but because the guy he killed was the son of a rich and influential Scottish family. The aftermath of this whole situation was so bad, the governor of the entire province basically told John to leave for his own safety. So he changed his name and got onto another ship called the Betsy, where he killed another guy over wage disputes, which is the second time he screwed over one of his employees to stay as the 1%. Which is so damn American, it brings a tear to my eye. Anyway, after getting his double kill, he didn't even bother going back to Scotland, instead hightailing to Virginia. It's around this time that John Paul Jones' half-brother died, leaving a huge estate in Virginia. So John Paul decided to pick up some new real estate, also pick up the middle name Jones, which means we finally get to the name John Paul Jones, and also starts drilling this hot piece of ass. It's also around this time when America decided they weren't going to have it with those dirty Brits anymore, and started to arm themselves, and being in need of a strong captain for the new American Navy, John Paul Jones stepped up to the plate. So John Paul Jones took command of this ship called the USS Alfred, and he put in a lot of work for the newly independent Americans, taking over 16 British ships in only 6 weeks. He was also the first to fly a prototype American flag, which, I mean, I couldn't think of a worse flag to represent us separating from Britain. Despite all the wins that John was taking, though, John Paul Jones was such a dickhead to work with that nobody in the American army actually wanted to deal with his shit. So they decided to send him away to France. And I quote this from Wikipedia, to do anything to help the American cause. Which just sounds like when your little brother wanted to play a game, but you knew he was going to drag everybody down and not make it fun, so you made him the referee so he felt involved. Anyway, it's in France where John Paul Jones started to become best friends with Benjamin Franklin, and also a lot of 1700s Parisian thoughts, but mainly Benjamin Franklin. It was also in France when John Paul Jones started to brew a genius military strategy against the British. So since John Paul Jones was in France, which was just a stone's throw away from England, he figured he could just build his own navy in France and then go destroy the unsuspecting British Navy right at their HQ, which up until this point point was absolutely raw-dogging the American Navy. So he pitched this to Benjamin Franklin, who gave John Paul Jones the go-ahead. And so the stage was set. One big win was when John Paul Jones was able to take control of a huge British ship named the HMS Drake, which was one of the few naval wins that the Continental Army had over the British. After John took control of the HMS Drake, he let this guy called Simpson ship it back to the French port. But then Jones and Simpson had an argument, which caused John to court-martial Simpson, which basically means he got put under arrest and detained on HMS Drake. Although a later consensus showed that pretty much all evidence points to John Paul Jones being a big dickhead. But he also was John Paul Jones, so they just kind of let him off the hook and do whatever. It's at this point when John Paul Jones was given control of a new ship named the Bonham Richard, which along with 4 other ships was sailing around in the North Sea when it came across a big-ass monster of a ship named the Serapis. Now, like I said, the British ships were extremely beefy, so when they started fighting, the British had the upper hand. But John Paul Jones figured out if he could board onto the Serapis and have his men kill the British Navy, he would be able to win through that, which is exactly what he did. That's a pretty big dub for him, although he did end up losing the Bonham Richard, which people now think happened because the other captains were so sick of John Paul Jones that they were trying to kill him, but they only ended up being able to sink his ship. Anyway, that battle against the Serapis solidified him as an American hero. After this point, America won its independence, and then John Paul Jones fought for the Russians, where he did the Minecraft YouTuber Classic, which is pretty bad, but no, yeah, it's pretty bad. Let's just move on. Anyway, that's the story of John Paul Jones.
Scalpels. Tongs. Elf bar. Elf bar? Yeah, I gotta blow this up his ass. If you have a problem, modern day medicine usually has the solution. Concussion? They gotta fix. Broken bone? They gotta fix. 5'6"? Join the club. Anyway, the modern day medical field is really a blessing and a miracle. I mean, for the longest time, literally any cut that could get infected ran the chance of killing you. So I figured I'd look through and compile some of the most bizarre medical practices of the past. Alright, so we're starting off strong with the tobacco enema. Yeah, it's pretty much in the name, but basically people inhaled tobacco and then blew the smoke up someone's rectum. And this was supposed to cure literally pretty much anything. People were getting these for any reason, depending on just having a cold, to the worst, most earth-shattering diarrhea ever. And that probably means some dude got liquid excrement sprayed on him while he was trying to blow smoke up someone's ass. Anyway, eventually fell out of style when old-timey doctors figured out smoking tobacco was bad for your heart, and I'm assuming also really bad for the receiver's rectum. And with that came the end of the smoke enema. Alright, so you've probably already heard of this one, but back in the day, bloodletting was really common. The idea was they would put leeches on you and have the leeches suck up your quote-unquote bad fluids. Obviously stupid, since these poor sick people were losing liters of blood when they were already sick, and bloodletting would cause their death if the sickness didn't. Now the crazy part is bloodletting was around for 3,000 years, which means for 3 millennia, not a single person questioned why all their leech patients kept on dying. Like for example, George Washington. Apparently he got sick and the doctors proceeded to suck 40% of the blood out of him, obviously causing his death, and probably causing him to look like that grandma from SpongeBob in his final days. So back in the early days, babies were dying left and right. In fact, if you were born in 1800s America, there was only a 50% chance you'd make it to 5. Even in 1900s America, you only had a 75% chance of making it to your 5th birthday. Anyway, because of all this infant mortality, doctors got together and tried to figure out what was the cause. Was it maybe because they kept on using their disgusting unwashed hands to deliver the baby? Or maybe it was because the moms kept on drinking like college freshmen while they were pregnant? No, it must be the baby's fault. The doctors figured babies kept on dying the same time they were getting their first teeth. So just cut off the teeth. Problem solved. So doctors did exactly that, and used all types of medical tools to immediately snatch the baby teeth, including fire for some reason, apparently burning the back of some babies, which, like how? Anyway, on the topic of babies, say you're a mom in 1900s America, and your baby just got some diarrhea. Uh-oh. Well, no worries, because Miss Winslow has a cure. I mean, she's just such a sweetheart. Jamie, can we pull up a picture of her? I mean, what an angel. It would be a shame if she was feeding that baby opium whiskey. Yup, apparently all you need is a concoction of morphine and whiskey to stop a baby's diarrhea, and also probably any more cognitive development. Now for most of these so far, even though they are horrific, at least there was an attempt. But with this one, it's like doctors were just seeing how much they could get away with at this point. Alright, so if you don't know, different humans have different blood types, and mixing the wrong blood types could be fatal. So obviously, if a doctor needed to administer a blood transfusion, He should probably know the patient's blood type, but for most of human history, doctors were none the wiser to this. So whenever people were getting blood transfusions, well, I mean, to be honest, most doctors were just kind of hoping they didn't accidentally kill their patients. But also, if they didn't have blood on hand, 1800s doctors used the next best thing, milk. Now, surprisingly, using milk as a blood substitute does not immediately kill everyone who gets them. But yeah, everyone who had milk in their body did also end up dying, as you could probably imagine. One particularly gruesome case was when doctors injected milk into the patient, and he immediately flatlined. And doctors got a little worried, so they resuscitated him with a mixture of opium and whiskey, which if anything sounds like a way to put someone to sleep, but he woke up, still alive, and then he died 10 days later. So say you're having a couple issues with the land down under. Okay, no wait, not Australia. Wait, oh no, yeah, that is what I'm talking about. Basically your dick doesn't work. And unfortunately you missed the medical miracle of Viagra by 100 years or so. So you turn to your current year's medicine to see what's the next best cure, and then you find the galvanized bath. Basically, men were expected to step into a bath that was electrocuted with the hopes that the electricity would bring back the vigor into their boners. Hey, so you're sure this is safe? What are you questioning me? No, look, I'm just a little curious as to how this actually helps me with my issue. Look, alright, I spent 8 years as a surgeon from DeVry University. I know what I'm talking about. Wait, isn't DeVry University that online school? And yeah, those were some of the worst medical procedures I could find. And this probably made you very grateful for the medical system we have today. Except when it gets time to actually pay. Then you wish you had just died. Anyway.
Yo, what's up? It's really only during war when humanity pushes itself to its fullest to gain an edge on the opponent. New battle tactics, technology, and brilliant ideas are all par for the course during conflicts. But for every invention as influential as the nuclear bomb or AK, some dingleberry tries to make a suicide bomber dog. Alright, so it's World War II and the Russians are getting steamrolled by the Nazis. I mean Germans. So the greatest Russian minds got together to find a solution, and so came the dog bomb. Basically, they figured if they strapped a bomb on a dog with a switch and had him run under a tank, they could stop the German invasion dead in its tracks. The issue with trying to train dogs into becoming explosive experts is their dogs. So first of all, the dogs really couldn't get the switches to go off by themselves. So the Russians just basically turned these dogs into suicide bombers. And I'm not gonna lie, if the thought that thousands of dogs were sent to untimely deaths in World War II depresses you, wait till you find out what the Germans were up to. But also, if karma exists, it definitely showed itself here, because the whole dog bomb thing really backfired on them. First of all, in the controlled environments where the dogs practiced, the dogs seemed to be doing great. But once the dogs were placed into active war sites, all the loud noises just scared the dogs, who returned back to their owner. On top of all that, the Russians trained their dogs with their own diesel tanks, instead of the German gasoline tanks. So the few dogs that actually did continue on with their mission figured they would just sniff their way to the tanks, which they did. Because of these reasons and the fact the Russian army had to keep on shooting their own dogs before they blew up more Russian men and Russian tanks, which wasn't particularly great for morale, it caused the dog bomb to eventually go out of style. Alright, so it's April of 1945 and the Germans just released their new submarine called the U-1206. That's right, baby, the U-1206. It's state-of-the-art everything, with one caveat. The toilets. The U-1206 toilets sucked. See, flushing the toilets was extremely complicated, to the point where there was a special technician that would open and close valves in a specific order to actually flush the toilet. And if the toileter was not to follow the sequence that they were supposed to when flushing the toilet wouldn't flush. And the whole submarine would flood. So the submarine was on patrol around Scotland when someone on the crew, whose identity is now lost to time, got on the toilet and did his business, and then he flushed the toilet. Oh my schnitzel! Immediately, the submarine started taking on seawater. On top of taking on a ton of seawater in the submarine, the leaking water also screwed with the batteries and produced chlorine gas, which is literally what they use in chemical warfare. So the crew was forced to surface the submarine right next to some British warships. And finally, by far the biggest military screw-up in history is the fact that we as a species have lost nuclear bombs. And it gets worse because while we Americans have lost 6 nuclear bombs, the Russians have lost anywhere from 100 to 250, which is crazy because not only did they lose the nuclear bombs, they don't even know how many nuclear bombs they've lost. Anyway, one specific moment where a nuclear bomb was lost was during the Tybee Island mid-air collision, in which basically there was this plane that got hit by another plane.
Hey, bro, watch your jet. Watch your jet, bro. Watch your jet!
And so this caused the first plane to start losing control, and in order to regain control of the plane, they decided to lose some little extra weight by dropping a nuclear bomb 10 miles off the coast of Georgia. And they were just kind of hoping the bomb did not explode on impact. Luck was on their side that day because it didn't explode. That being said, literally no one knows where the bomb is today, although the Department of Energy thinks it's somewhere in the Wassaw Bay, so at least it's far away in the ocean and not... Oh my god. That's right, if you live in Savannah, Georgia, or anywhere near that region, there's probably a 60-year-old nuclear bomb right off your shore. Anyway, that's some of the military mishaps from throughout history. I'm sure there's more, so I'll probably make a part 2 to this. I've already found a couple since I made the script. But anyway, please like and subscribe. It helps a lot.
Yo, ever wished you lived in the top crust of society? Because while we plebeians are rationing out our expenses for the month, the 1% of the world are living lavishly, doing whatever they please, and don't have to face any consequences.
Most of the time.
Anyway, there have been a lucky few who have actually been able to claw their way out of the peasant class, and no one has had a more explosive and mysterious uprising into power as Rasputin. So Rasputin was born as a peasant in buttfuck nowhere Russia. Not much is known about Rasputin's youth,
But the small amount of records we do have on him show him to be a bit of a hooligan. He was also illiterate on account of being a disgusting peasant.
Anyway, as Rasputin started to get older, he began traveling around Russia, which is when he met a peasant girl named Praskovia Dobrovin, and they both fell in love and had kids. So Rasputin was settled down until he had a holy vision from the Virgin Mary, telling him he needed to go on a religious pilgrimage. That or he was on the run for stealing horses from his village. Whatever it is, this first pilgrimage took him to St. Nicholas's monastery, where he was apparently greatly humbled by the monks there. But later, and this is according to Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt, Rasputin said the monks were actually homosexual and were trying to get Rasputin to do gay things with them. Want to play Soggy Communion Cracker? Anyway, despite the gay monks being a huge turnoff for Rasputin, he did change a lot from his time in the cathedral, and by the time he got back to his family and peasant wife, he had become a vegetarian and started to pray a lot more. Basically, Rasputin finally became a family man, albeit a crazed, borderline schizophrenic one. But then...
Rasputin! Rasputin! What did I tell you about leaving the toilet seat up? I told you not to do this, Rasputin, and why is the trash not taken out?
Oh my god, I'm having another vision from the Virgin Mary. She's telling me to start a sex cult. I mean, find God. See you in 5 years. And with that, Rasputin traveled to St. Petersburg, which at the time was the capital of Russia. It's in St. Petersburg where Rasputin started to become really popular in saloons for being an unwashed peasant who had mythical healing powers, and raved about being the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's in these same saloons where he started to commingle with a bunch of high-ranking officials in the government, so he started to become well known in the Russian higher-up circles. Eventually, this got him invited to meet the Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II. Now, Nicholas and his wife Alexandra had a son named Alexis, who had a chronic illness that had no treatment and was in constant pain because of it. And both Nicholas and Alexandra were convinced that Rasputin would be able to heal their son, which I don't know how the fuck you convince one of the strongest men in the world at the time that you're some godly figure that can do this, but whatever Rasputin did, it worked. Rasputin was able to, on multiple occasions, alleviate his illness, and this caused Alexandra to get very, very, very attached to Rasputin. That's right, the goat-herding, smelly peasant that never showered and didn't know how to use a spoon or fork was raw-dogging the Queen of Russia right under the king's nose. So Rasputin started to show up frequently to help alleviate Alexis's pain, and then swiftly smashed Alexis's mother, and was generally just having the time of his life. But eventually, Rasputin had to go back to his stinky, boring peasant life, because everyone in the Russian higher-ups started to get fed up of him. And it's during this time when Rasputin was with his family at home, when Alexis once again was in life-threatening condition after he tried to ride a horse, which I don't know why they let him ride a horse. Like, he can barely exist without having issues. But they called up Rasputin again, and Rasputin told Queen Alexandra to not let any of the doctors give him any medicine. And the queen actually listened to Rasputin, and to everyone's surprise, the next day Alexis was completely fine. Now at this point you might be thinking, damn, did Rasputin actually have some mythological powers to him? Well, probably not. For one, we know the medicines the doctors were giving to Alexis actually exacerbated his issues, which is why Rasputin telling them to not give him any more medicine actually helped him. The rest of Rasputin's magical healing powers probably had to do with the fact Rasputin was putting Alexis into hypnosis, because he just knew how to hypnotize people. I don't know where the fuck he picked that skill up from. The Russian royals were none the wiser to any of this though, and a lot of them start to get really attached to Rasputin. That's right, just smashing the Queen of Russia was not enough, because he ended up seducing 4 other duchesses of Russia. He also apparently had an apartment in St. Petersburg with a harem of women, which really was more of a cult. They all were convinced he was the second coming of Christ, and they all started coming for Christ. So you might now be realizing this whole thing is absurd, and so did the general Russian public. So there was a ton of public upheaval at this time, and magazines and political cartoons would literally make Nicholas II a cuck in the corner watching his wife with Rasputin. It's around this time World War II was starting, and Tsar Nicholas, seeking glory, decided to fight in the front lines, which, side note, did not go well for Russia or the Tsar. But anyway, Russia being in the war meant the Tsar was temporarily out of town. So Rasputin kinda just waltzed back in, mainly because the queen was getting horny, and now he was basically acting as the de facto ruler of the entire country. The only issue with this is Rasputin really only knew how to start cults and no, that's pretty much it. So when it came to politics, he did not have the slightest clue what he was actually doing. He did appoint some people to help him, but the people he appointed were also unwashed goat herders, so the entire country was going to shit at this point. The Russian nobles were done with him. So one day, the Grand Duke and Prince of Russia invited Rasputin over to a hotel for a chat. They gave Rasputin cake and wine which was laced with cyanide. But despite eating all this poisoned food, he was completely fine, and even asked for 3 more glasses of poisoned wine, only to drink all that down and still be fine. So at this point, the Grand Duke was like, what the fuck? And just pulled out a gun and shot Rasputin, because obviously he needed to take the nuclear option here. And with the pull of that trigger, the greatest con artist, and possibly the second coming of Christ, except he definitely was not the second coming of Christ, met his fate. The 2 men wrapped up Rasputin's corpse and drove him to the side of a bridge to dump him into a river. When out of nowhere, Rasputin comes back to life and starts attacking the dude who shot him. And most surprisingly of all, he was actually winning the fight. After being shot in the chest, just as he was about to overpower the guy he was fighting, the other man shot him again and finally slayed Rasputin. And with that, they dropped him into the river. But then he swam back and no-scoped the 2 guys. I'm kidding. That really was the end of Rasputin. Overall, his legacy is something that has persisted nearly 80 years after his death. And it's like mostly because of this song. But I mean, it's still pretty impressive, so I hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider liking and subscribing. Yo, what's up? So I have this habit where every time I have an unhinged thought, I write it down on my notes app. Here's some deranged things that I've thought of. So I think I got this first one from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but every time I swim in the ocean, I think about how pretty much every single sea animal has pissed into the water. So you're basically swimming in animal piss. I mean, the blue whale alone pisses 120 liters of urine into the water every single day. And on top of that, they can produce 20 liters of sperm. And I'm no statistician, but if I had to guess, there's probably a good chance that every time you step foot into the ocean, that you've grazed a molecule of blue whale cum. Alright, next. So humans are born through a huge race, and the race is basically the first sperm cell that can reach the egg, which makes me think about the sperm cell right behind me and what it was meant to be. Like, what if the sperm cell behind me was meant to be like the next Zac Efron pre-plastic surgery, but it got caught in traffic? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's an alternate universe where that sperm cell made it, and I'm a 6'5", 220-pound muscled beast. But that sperm cell made one wrong turn on the way there, and I came out instead. Okay, this next one was when I was at a restaurant, and I was eating oysters. And then it struck me that at some point in human history, someone had to have looked at an oyster or mussel and thought, yeah, I'm gonna eat that. Like, it's a rock, you know what I'm saying? You have to boil it to even, like, get into it. Which then made me realize that humans have probably tried so much dumb shit to figure out what we know now. Like, if you really think about it, to figure out that specific herbs have medicinal or psychedelic properties, people just had to eat random shit off the forest floor and hope they didn't die. So for every Neanderthal that was tripping off magic mushrooms, some other poor soul probably kicked the bucket from eating, not so magical mushrooms. Okay, this next one isn't even a shower thought, but it's just an opinion. But I'm a firm believer that applesauce is just adult baby food. I say that mainly because of its consistency and its flavor just being so boring. I think I just hate applesauce. I don't know. Okay, so every 30 years, humans realize that there's a material they've been using this entire time that's horrible for us. Like, for the longest time, we were using asbestos in our walls or using plutonium on everyday appliances. And it's only like 100 years after using the thing where we realized that it was horrible for us and a huge detriment to our health. And that makes me think that there's probably so much shit around us that we have no clue how
horrible it is for us. I mean, think about how fast technology has progressed. You probably get a new piece of technology every year, whether that be a new VR headset, some new AirPods, or a new iPhone. Like, there's no way that there's not something we all have around us that's probably horrible for us, and we just don't know it yet. And the rest of these thoughts that I have in here are either completely unintelligible to me, because I wrote most of these at like 2 a.m., or they're just not, that interesting. But anyway, I hope...
Fellas, let me paint you a picture. It's the 1920s and you're the head of Dole Fruit Company, shipping out pineapples and bananas, completely violating all the human rights of your poor Honduran farmers and making lots of money. Life is good, but there is one thing you often wonder about. Is it possible to fly a plane from California to Hawaii, a feat that has not been done yet? So you acquire your massive pineapple wealth and raise $25,000, or $420,000 in today's money, and put it as a prize for the first man to fly his plane from California to Hawaii. Now, while this does sound like a great idea on paper, this race would go on to become the biggest American airplane tragedies of all time. Okay, this race would go on to be the second biggest American airplane tragedy of all time. So first of all, before the race even started, someone already was able to fly from California to Hawaii, and that would be the US Army. Although Dole ended up disqualifying them from the race because, I guess sunk cost fallacy, he had already set the race up. I'm not sure, to be honest. Anyway, obviously with the prize this big, pilots from far and wide gathered to take part in this race. Now, initially, there were supposed to be 18 different aircraft that took part in this race, but because of a multitude of reasons, not all 18 were able to make it to the race. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here are some of the contestants. The first two pilots that showed up were an Arthur Golbeil and Dick Grace, both of which were famously part of the Suicide Squadron. Dick Grace was taking the name to heart because he fucking crashed the airplane he was using beforehand and had to ship a completely new plane in for the race. Anyway, aside from these pilots, there was a lot of alternative weird plane designs being used for this competition. Now, I'm gonna go out on a whim and say most words that start with alternative are great things. Like, for example, alternative women, they're hot. Alternative music, pretty good. Alternative plane designs, a lot of these alternative airplanes didn't even end up making it to the race because they had mechanical issues. Of the planes that did make it there though, there was one named El Enchanto, which was designed based off of a bird, a hand glider, a different plane model, or a salmon. It was the fish. Yup. There was also another plane named the Oklahoma. Now, there's nothing of particular note about this plane. It's just the fact that out of all the places in the world they could have named their plane after, they chose Oklahoma. That's like people who buy graphic t-shirts and the only thing on the t-shirt is Kansas. Why does this t-shirt exist? Like, what's the point? Are they happy they went to Kansas? Anyway, even of the planes that did end up working, many ended up still failing on their way to the race. For example, there was two pilots named Koval and Wagner who were flying a plane named the Spirit of John Roger on the way to the Dole Air Race when they got caught up in some fog and crashed into a cliff. Another plane that was supposed to take part in the race crashed into San Francisco Bay, but somehow nobody died in this accident. The same cannot be said for a British pilot named Arthur V. Rogers, who was flying the Angel of Los Angeles when all of a sudden he described his plane as flying queer and crashed. Anyway, the remaining planes did end up making it to the race, though they were going to have a slight delay because there was going to be some horrible weather in between Hawaii and California. Although since the organization in Hawaii did not want to postpone, they only ended up delaying for 4 days, which means these pilots still had to fly in horrible weather conditions. It's a good thing the race was postponed for 4 days though, because that gave organizers extra time to make sure each pilot and plane was up to regulation and code. So first of all, 5 of the pilots didn't even have a license. Then there was the predetermined course these pilots had to go through, and literally none of the pilots were able to pass this test, which means they literally failed on a practice course a couple days before they were going to be the first people to fly across the Pacific to Hawaii. That's like if you failed your driver's test, never even seen a driver's license, and then I made you drive in the Indy 500. You literally become a skid mark 20 minutes in. Anyway, after multiple attempts, most were able to pass, and so the stage was set for the actual race. Months of building their airplanes, weeks of anxiety, hundreds and thousands of people watching from the sidelines in awe, all for this moment. And immediately, the first 2 planes failed. Oklahoma's engine started to overheat, and El Enchanto never even got off the runway. Okay, not Not the best start, but finally, the Popco Flyer was the first plane to make it off the tarmac, before immediately hurtling back down and crashing. Also, another plane named the Dallas Spirit had mechanical issues, so they weren't able to make it up either. The other contestants were able to make it up though, meaning there were still 4 teams in the running, and with that the race was on. Which, despite this being the climax of this entire video, not a whole lot is known about what actually happened during the race. And this is because even though the entire route from California to Hawaii had ships with radios, only a single plane had a radio that could actually communicate back with the ships. So as you could imagine, being out there in the open ocean with literally no way to communicate could cause things to go awry. Anyway, after 26 hours and 17 minutes, through the fog came a plane, the Woolrack, with Arthur Gobiel inside. He was the first one of the 4 to actually make it to Hawaii, meaning his team got the main prize. The second place was this plane called the Aloha with Mr. Jensen, who if you told me was representing Team Germany, I would not have raised an eyebrow. Anyway, he scored his team $10,000, only to give his teammate Schluter $25. $25. Are you kidding me? Now, even though Schluter definitely got the short end of the stick, he should be grateful because the other two, Miss Doran and the Golden Eagle, were never seen again. There were wide searches for them. In fact, both Gobiel and Jensen's cheap ass went out on rescue missions to try to find them, but no sight of them was ever seen again. All in all, of the 18 teams that started off participating, only 2 of them would ever end up actually completing the race, which is literally 11%. The end. Yeah, this one was kind of a bummer, I won't lie, but I hope you enjoyed watching. Consider.
Yo, what's up? The modern day toilet is one of those things that we all take granted for. Simple act of sitting down and painting the inside of your porcelain throne in peace and privacy is something that is more of a modern day luxury than most people realize. I mean, I for one skipped many math and ELA classes in high school by faking going to the bathroom only to play Clash Royale and lose to fucking Mega Knight. Despite that sad fact from my life though, I'll always be thankful for toilets because honestly, they're great compared to what we had to offer in the past. I mean, take the Romans. Despite being the center of the world for 1,000 years, the empire's bathrooms were downright fucking disgusting. So okay, say you're a Roman and you really need to take a shit, right? Alright, let's say you haven't been keeping up with your vegetables recently, so there's no fiber in your diet and you're feeling quite constipated. So you're about to go into the bathroom, but then you realize Romans only have communal bathrooms. So you're in a sweaty, disgusting room with a handful of other gentlemen while you're sitting there fighting for your life and probably getting anal fissures trying to release this constipated dump, right? But whatever, this is all you have, right? So after 10 minutes of just pure pain and agony, you're finally able to get the poop through, and you reach for the toilet paper, but then you realize they don't have toilet paper. Instead, they have a sponge on a stick soaking in vinegar, and that sponge is communal. And it looks like Cassius from down the street had Taco Bell and Indian food, which has stained the sponge, but you know what? You got no other option, right? So you put the sponge in your ass and you start wiping, but he had Indian food like I said. So now your ass is on fire. And if that Indian food is not enough, apparently having communal toilet sponges are a hotbed for diseases. I know, shocker. So now you probably have intestinal worms going in your GI tract and giving you dysentery. This is a real thing, by the way. Apparently intestinal worms were a real rampant issue in Rome because of these sponges. And I mean, the Romans were are very smart people too, so it's beyond me why they continue to do this to themselves. I guess the sponge feeling was too good for them. But anyway, we traveled to the beautiful land of India, where during the Middle Ages, Indians used seated toilets with holes that led to pits where your shit would collect. Now you might be saying, Adee, what's wrong with these toilets? You know what I'm saying? These seem like normal toilets. There's nothing wrong with these toilets. It's a great toilet. My issue is the fact that today if you go to India, the toilets look like this, and this, and this. Somehow India has reverted and went from seated toilets to little holes in the ground, right? And I'm Indian myself, and I went to India as a child, and every time I had to go number 2, I would literally get depressed because I knew, first off, since they don't flush, it was gonna smell like shit in there. But also, when I'm gonna have to poop, I'm gonna have to squat, right? So I'm gonna have to try to balance and not tip over. I don't know, maybe I'm just whitewashed from growing up in America, but why don't they just bring the seated toilet back? Anyway, that's the ancient history of toilets. So hopefully you have a greater appreciation for toilets now. Unless you're Indian, in which case, yeah, your toilets suck ass compared to their predecessors. But anyway, subscribe.
Have you ever invested in the stock market? The first time I ever did, I was making some quick money on Tesla, and I thought I was the next Warren Buffett. Of course, that was until my next genius investment, Dogecoin. And
Yeah, but unlike me, there are people who have made a lot of money trading, like one Vincent Kasuga. Except his fortune wasn't made through gambling on cryptocurrency. Instead, Vincent Kasuga became a millionaire through trading onions. So this is Vincent Kasuga. Now, despite looking like the leader of a cult in this picture, Kasuga started out life as a pretty pure and humble guy. He spent the first quarter of his life a devout Catholic who farmed celery, lettuce, and onions on his farm in upstate New York, when he decided it was time for him to make his mark on the financial world. But instead of the stock market, Kasuga decided to trade in the mercantile market in Chicago, which is basically just the stock market for crops. He started off selling wheat, but like my ill-fated Dogecoin investment, the wheat index was not working out. Oh my god. Honey, I just got a letter from the bank saying you withdrew all of our money. Oh yeah, I came across this really profitable investment. Oh, okay, what did you invest in? Oh, it's like a really profitable investment. I'm sure it's gonna pay out. Did you buy wheat again? No? No? Yeah, we're filing for bankruptcy. I'm not joking, Vincent was such an abysmal trader, he had to remortgage his farm, and his wife made him promise to never trade on the mercantile market again. And for a short time, Vincent did actually keep his head out of the market. But you can't keep a good man down, and you definitely can't keep a good gambler down, because eventually his inner addict decided it was time for round 2. Except this time, Vincent had learned from his mistakes. No longer was Vincent going to be trading stinky old wheat contracts. Vincent was moving on to bigger and better things. That's right, baby. You know 'em, you love 'em. Onions. Now, to you, an onion is probably something you don't think much about. But on the mercantile market, onions are the most valuable crop. For some reason. So Vincent started trading onions, and something must have clicked for him because he started popping off. Through hard work and manipulation, he slowly started to carve out a fortune for himself. And I'm not joking about the manipulation part. There was a lot of manipulation going on because Vincent started to play dirty. For example, he once bribed a news station into saying that there would be a flash frost. Now, to the untrained eye, this might seem like the most useless bribe ever. But to my onion heads out there, you'll realize this was a genius move because freezing weather equals dead onions equals expected drop in supply of onions equals onion prices are through the roof equals Vincent's laughing to the bank. Dubious and probably borderline illegal stunts like this was Kasuga's bread and butter to make his riches. But that was child's play compared to the master plan that Vince was cooking up. That's because in 1955, Vince and his business partner Sam Siegel came up with an extremely risky play. But before I can explain Kasuga and Siegel's idea, I need to explain what an onion future is. Wait, no, it's really simple, I promise. Basically, buying a futures contract is like pre-ordering a video game. You are paying a set price for something with the expectation you'll get that product in the future. In the same vein, onion futures are basically buying onions at a set price before onions are actually grown and harvested. So back to Kasuga and Siegel. They figured if they both pooled their entire net worth together and bought as many onions as they could pretty much buy all the onions that were being sold on the market. And if they monopolized all the onions, they could control the price of onions and profit big time. So Kasuga and Siegel prepared, and in the fall of 1955, they went on a buying spree, trying to own as many onions as possible. Then to compensate for any new onions that were harvested and sold, they bought all the onion futures available. When the dust was settled, Kasuga and Siegel owned 98% of the onions on the mercantile market, which basically means they effectively owned every onion in America, all 30 million pounds of them. Honey, why am I getting another letter from the bank? Okay, I made another investment, but this time it's actually a really good investment, honey, don't worry. I thought we said no more investments. What did you invest in? You know. What is it? Onions? What did you say? Onions? Speak up, I can't hear what you're saying. Onions! Onions? Yeah, onions. All the onion. I bought every onion in America. I want a divorce. I understand. So like I said, Vince was now the proud owner of 30 million pounds of onions. And 30 million is at the point where numbers don't really mean anything because it's too big of a number to really quantify. So to give you scale, 30 million pounds of onions is equivalent to 384 African elephants, 12 Boeing 747s, and then the entire weight of the Eiffel Tower all added together. Or, on the flip side, 30 million British pounds could also buy you a used 1998 Corolla with 200,000 miles on it in the used car market right now. So since Vince owned all these onions, he needed a place to actually house them, while maintaining the quality of these onions so he could eventually sell them back to the market. He initially thought he could fit all these onions in a little warehouse on his property, but there was not enough space, so basically, he had to set up warehouses all across America to store these onions for the time being. Anyway, with all this onion power, Vince called over all the big heads of the onion business for a meeting. Hello? Hey?
Thanks for coming, guys. My name is Vincent Kasuga. I go by Vinny D, and I own all the onions. Oh my god, this is crazy. What is he gonna do with all those onions? Alright, now listen. Since I own almost all the onions, I want you to sell onions at this price. And if you guys try to sell any cheaper than the Vinny D price, TM, that's trademarked, I'm gonna drop a huge oniony load on the market and bankrupt all of you. I guess we have to accept. Why did he say oniony load like that? Yeah, that sounded gay as hell. Alright, we accept your deal, but what's stopping you from selling all your onions behind our back? Come on, guys, I'm Vinny D, you can trust me. He does seem pretty trustworthy. Why is he called Vinny D? His last name's Kasuga. Sorry, I had Indian food last night. Okay, we accept. See, this was Vincent's game plan this entire time, because Vincent had bought shorts on onions, which basically meant if the price of onions went down, Vincent made money. So Vincent helped lower the price of onions by selling all 30 million pounds of onions back to the mercantile market at once. He ended up selling so many almost expired onions, and the price of onions got so cheap that onions were actually worth less than the bags they were being transported in. Onions were literally given out for free to orphanages and homeless shelters, and they still ended up having too many onions. It was so bad that a lot of onions just ended up being thrown into the Chicago River. At the same time, entire cities were entirely out of onions because all of the town's onions were now being shipped off to Chicago. Anyway, in the end, Vincent walked away with somewhere around $8.5 million, or when adjusted for inflation, around $97 million in today's money. Of course, the money was only made through bankrupting a bunch of onion farmers, many of whom ended up unaliving themselves. But it's cool because Vincent ended up donating so much money to the Catholic Church, he met 3 different popes, so he's probably still gonna get into heaven. Anyway, Vincent's stunt ended up catching the eyes of Congress, who wanted to get Vincent in trouble, but really, he hadn't done anything illegal. But to make sure something like this never happened again, they passed the Onion Futures Ban Act, which basically banned onion futures. Yeah, it's pretty much in the name. Anyway, this whole thing makes me think that if futures were only banned for onions, isn't it possible to do the same thing with literally any other crop? And if I just gave some random billionaire this idea, who for some reason is watching my video, you trying to help a brother out? Please, man, I got student loans. Anyway, as for Vincent, after his onion fiasco, he started a restaurant called the Jolly Onion Inn. Aside from that, he's basically best friends with the Pope like I said before, and also somehow survived a fucking plane crash. When his plane ran out of fuel, like it literally ran out of fuel midair and nosedived, and he was completely fine, apparently making a quick recovery. And then he kicked the bucket in 2001. And that was the man who at one point owned almost all the onions in America. Thank you for watching.
Yo, what's up? My small amount of work experience at a supermarket was definitely not the best. The highlight of my shift was getting to eat expired food that they were going to throw away. Except I worked at a vegan place, so even that was shit. But even the worst minimum wage jobs today have nothing compared to some of the most obscure careers of the past. The first career, or really more forced role, was that of the whipping boy. So when a prince was born, they were assigned to a tutor to help them run the country and whatnot. But like most young chaps, princes got up to some tomfoolery. And unlike all the other peasant kids, you can't exactly whip a royal child into discipline. So the tutors did the next best thing, emotional trauma. Specifically, they would pick some random orphan schmuck off the streets and have him play with the prince until the two of them formed a bond. Then every time the prince misbehaved, instead of disciplining the prince, the tutor would just beat the shit out of the boy in front of the prince. Hence the name the whipping boy. Alright, Beetlejuice, please, for the love of God, get this right. Because I think Bartholomew over there is going to go into anaphylactic shock, okay? Listen, Beetlejuice, how do you spell red?
L-S-T-E-R.
No. Please, Beetlejuice, how do you spell red?
L-S-T.
No, Beetlejuice, think, okay? How do you spell
L-S-T-E-R.
Moving on, in a time before easily sourced medical cadavers and Surgeon Simulator, new surgeons didn't really have a way to practice and learn surgeries unless they were using an actual dead body to see the surgery be done for the first time. The way these bodies were sourced was that once a prisoner was executed, a medical professional would buy the dead body and use it to show new surgeons how to do surgery. Now the issue with this was, at the time, not enough prisoners were getting the death penalty. Damn liberals. And because of that, there weren't enough dead bodies for surgery. It got to the point where doctors were bidding on prisoners before they were even sentenced to death for right to their bodies. In an effort to fill the void in this market, so came the resurrectionists. Their job was to steal bodies from graves and sell them to medical professionals, which was extremely lucrative. Some resurrectionists started to get creative by sending females into funerals to play fake wives of the person who died, so that they could get info on the corpse, like how old it was and how messed up it was before it died. Alright man, I got some new top shelf, check it out. What the fuck is this? Where are the organs? It's all fat. How did you even hoist him out of his grave? All right, man, calm down, okay? Look, if you buy him, I'll throw in another corpse. Anyway, if you were a gravedigger and you ended up getting caught, the worst you were really going to get was a light prison sentence. And that's because everyone saw the job as a necessary evil so that the next generation of surgeons knew what they were doing. I mean, it makes sense because I definitely would rather have a few empty graves than have my liver go missing during a root canal. Whatever it is, the practice eventually died out when two guys called Burke and Hare ended up having the $1,000,000 business idea of just murdering people and then selling the corpses. And finally we have the Knock-Knobbler. Now just off of that name, take a wild guess as to what the Knock-Knobbler does. If you said chasing little children and dogs out of churches, then you're right. Apparently it was a real issue back then, so churches started to hire a guy to just chase dogs out while the priest was trying to carry out a sermon. Anyway, that's about it. Yo, what's up? Laws have been around for about as long as civilization has been. In general, laws are pretty reasonable. But that's not to say I'm a fan of all laws though. I know, outrageous. But after hearing some of these laws, I think you too might question why we still keep some of these rules around. Our first law takes us to the beautiful state of Oklahoma, where citizens start to worry about their native whale population being hunted to extinction. So lawmakers took action, and in 2006, Oklahoma code made it illegal to hunt and kill whales. The law has been such a great deterrent that ever since it was enacted, there has not been a single whale murdered in all of Oklahoma. Also in Oklahoma, pretending to have sex with a buffalo in a bar is illegal. So I guess if you ever find yourself in a bar with a baddie of a buffalo, you might as well commit to fourth base. In Georgia, Kentucky, and Alabama, it's illegal to keep an ice cream cone in your back pocket. Oh my god, put your hands up. Is that an ice cream cone in your back pocket? Oh my god, that was a close call. I'm really sorry, sir. Apparently, the reason that this law was put into place was, back in the 1800s, horse thieves would put ice cream cones in their back pocket and use it to lure horses away. And this worked because horses are apparently very fond of ice cream cones. Also, take everything I just said with a grain of salt because my source is a message from Reddit from 9 years ago by Kamikaze Erection. Moving to Florida, it's illegal to toss midgets. Now, you might be asking me, why did they make this a law? The reason is because, apparently, in Florida bars, too many midgets kept on kicking the bucket because it was a bar stunt to throw these midgets across the room. And look, there's actually a lot of drama behind this law because in 2012, Representative Rich Workman did what no other politician was brave enough to do. He decided it was time to repeal the law. Now, to be clear, Workman is not trying to repeal midget tossing because he wants to see little people get flung across the room. In fact, he finds midget tossing repulsive. I would never go to a midget tossing event. The reason Workman did want the law to go was because, and this is not a joke, he saw the law as destroying the freedom and liberties of the Floridian people, saying it was an example of Big Brother government. But Workman was facing huge backlash from the midget community. See, the midgets, they saw right through Workman's baloney for the dirty midget tossing sympathizer that he was. Look at his cold soulless eyes and glistening bald head. It's almost bright enough to blind you from the truth. The truth that we let monsters like this into Capitol Hill. Thankfully, the midgets' protests were not in vain because, and I quote, Workman's decision to let the bill die is a quiet victory for little people like Leah Smith. This is huge, Smith said to the Huffington Post. All things considered, this was a big fight, but it shows that a lot of progress has been made. Godspeed, midgets. And to end it off, in Sarpornensk, France, it is illegal to die unless the person who died has already purchased a plot in a local cemetery. And apparently, if you break this law, you will be severely punished, although they never actually state what your punishment is. What the hell do you think you're doing? Look at me when I'm speaking to you. Oh, so you're a big tough guy now, huh? You don't have to answer to the law? Alright, well you bought this all on yourself, buddy. And that's some of the stupid laws around the world. Hope you enjoyed.
Yo, what's up? Let's be honest, who actually enjoys watching marathons? I mean, the appeal of most sports is watching either big men beat each other up or beat each other up over a ball. But marathons are the complete opposite. No one's getting beat up, and instead of big men, it's a bunch of guys jogging for 3 hours. The one thing marathons have going for themselves is, as far as sports go, it's pretty simple. All you need for a good marathon race is a track, some water, and a bunch of skinny Ethiopians. But what if I told you, somehow, we as a species still managed to completely screw up setting up a marathon event? And it happened in St. Louis. So it's 1904, and the World Olympics are being held in St. Louis, a city best known for this arch, and also a murder rate that makes Chicago look like Disneyland. Now usually, when you think of the Olympics, you think of the largest, most respected organization that shows just what the finest athletes are able to achieve. But in 1904, Not so much. Okay, so for one, there was no marathon track actually laid out for this race. Instead, the track for the 1904 marathon consisted of dirt roads with jagged rocks and passed through the main city of St. Louis, which means these runners were trying to make record time while trying to dodge everyday pedestrians, cars, and whatever else St. Louis has going on. If that's not good enough, this race took place on an afternoon in August 30th, which means the weather outside was 90 degrees, or 32 degrees Celsius. But hey look, it might be 90 degrees outside, and they're dodging pedestrians, trains, and cars for this race. But at least they can feel safe knowing that they got water, right? Right? Enter James E. Sullivan, the guy who is the chief organizer of the race, and coincidentally, a guy also wondering how humans deal with water deprivation. So he decided to test that during the Olympics. So this whole race only had one water source, a well which was 11 miles into the race. And finally, look at this lineup. Do you see any worryingly underweight Kenyans here? No you don't, which means this race has already failed all three things needed for a good marathon. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here are some of the contestants that did take part in this race. Okay, so first we have Frederick Loers, a New York City bricklayer who trained the marathon in his free time. There was Thomas Hicks, a brass worker from Boston, two South African men named Len and Jan, and Albert Corey, a French man who didn't even have the right documents to be in the race. Alright sir, I need your documents. Oui, I have it right here. Bruh. Gertrude Lewinsky? I might look a little different. I lost some weight. Another contestant of the race was a 5'1", 95-pound man, and definitely the comedic relief of this whole fiasco, Felix Carvajal. So Felix was a Cuban who was a mailman by trade, and technically not even invited to the race. Felix raised the funds for this by running for tips across Cuba, which got him enough money to take a boat trip to America, where he immediately lost all his money gambling in New Orleans. So to get himself through the 700 miles between New Orleans and St. Louis, Carvajal hitchhiked and ran his way to the event, and by the time he showed up, he hadn't even eaten for 2 entire days. And with that, the stage was set. Under the humid St. Louis heat, professional marathon runners, people who had put all their free times to making this dream happen, and a really hungry Cuban readied themselves to make their mark in history. And immediately issues arose. Okay, so first of all, remember how I said most of this race was run on dirt roads? Well, the organizers of the event followed the general crowd of runners with cars, one in the front of the pack and the other behind. Yeah, this seems completely trivial until you realize these cars were kicking up massive dust clouds that the participants then had to run in. The dust clouds, on top of all the other things, meant participants were falling out of the race left and right. One of the American runners, William Garcia, was literally coughing up blood because of the dust clouds and had to drop out of the race. And he's not the only one. For one reason or another, many runners ended up coming to the conclusion that this just was not worth it. Meanwhile, Felix, who at this point had not eaten for 2 days, saw some random spectators munching on peaches. So he asked if he could have the delicious peaches that they were eating, which they denied, and so he stole them and made a run for it. Len, on the other hand, being African, already had a lot of experience not having water. What he could not have planned for though was a pack of rabid dogs that ran him completely off the course. And by the time the dogs gave up their chase, Len was almost an entire mile away from the route of the marathon. Yeah, overall the race was not going well for anyone, except Felix, I guess. But that was until... Alright, no water, check. Runners dying in dust clouds, check. Rabid dogs screwing over the first black representation we've ever had in the Olympics, check. Alright, things are looking good. It's probably going to be a while till anybody makes it past this finish line. That's right. After 3 hours and 13 minutes, Frederick Loers gracefully ran into the finish line. And looking no worse for wear considering he just put himself through 40 miles of hell. Despite all the challenges presented by this race, either purposefully or accidentally, this beast of a man was first to finish, with a mind-boggling lead of 15 minutes before the second guy in running. Pun definitely intended. And Frederick got the champion treatment that he deserved, including the cheer and admiration of the entire audience, a gold medal, and almost a picture with the daughter of Teddy Roosevelt when... Good job, Frederick, you did amazing. Oh, wait a second. Psst. Frederick? Yeah? Did you do what I think you did? Okay, I might have had a Poland Spring bottle on the way here. No, not that, dumbass. Did you drive a car during a marathon? No, what? No. Yup, Frederick Loers, the initial guy who won this entire race, only won because he drove 11 miles of the race with his manager till the car broke down, and then he decided to start the marathon for real. And in doing so, blew past a completely demoralized and real first place of very dehydrated Hicks, who after seeing how well Frederick was doing, was on the verge of quitting, but continued after he found out about Frederick's disqualification. Alright, so this whole thing has been pretty embarrassing for everybody involved, but I wonder what Felix is up to. Oh, he's still going strong. Wait, okay, looks like Felix is getting a little hungry again. Luckily, he's near some apples. Dang, I bet those taste so good after 2 hours of running. Uh-oh. That's right, after taking another impromptu snack break, Felix made himself violently ill from eating some rotten apples, causing him to take a nap in the middle of a marathon. Anyway, back to Thomas Hicks, who at this point was really at his last straw when his trainer pulled out their secret weapon. What was it? Rat poison mixed with brandy and eggs. See, there's this compound called strychnine, which along with its many uses in rat extermination, is also a 5-hour energy before 5-hour energy even existed. That being said, the other side effects of strychnine are extreme difficulty breathing and completely uncontrollable and debilitating muscle spasms. This also does technically mean that Thomas Hicks was using performance-enhancing drugs for this race, but that's really peanuts at this point. So throughout the entirety of this race, Thomas Hicks was given 2 milligrams of strychnine mixed with brandy and eggs, which nowhere can I figure out why this mix specifically. Like maybe his trainer had him drink brandy because brandy isn't water, so he didn't piss off the chief organizer. But alcohol also literally dehydrates people, which would only make Hicks's situation worse, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe the brandy was to make Hicks forget about his pain, or maybe he was trying to mask the taste of the rat poison with brandy. And then the eggs. Why the eggs? It's almost like he had these on hand and was like, fuck it. Anyway, at this point, Hicks was really starting to break down. And because of the strychnine and dehydration, Hicks was cramping up and his skin started to take on a grayish tone, which I didn't even know it was possible for humans to do that. Hicks also started hallucinating things, and I think it's fair to assume that he probably wasn't even conscious anymore. In the end, Hicks was so exhausted that he ended up collapsing just in front of the finish line, and was carried over by his team as he kept on trying to run in the air. Throughout the entire ordeal, Hicks lost an astonishing 8 pounds, which made me initially think, holy shit, did this man shit out his liver? That is ridiculous. But no, come on, that's crazy. No, Hicks actually shat out the equivalent of 3 livers. Hicks never even got to celebrate, as the second he finished, he was carried over in a stretcher to 3 doctors who immediately provided medical aid to him. Except this was 1904 doctors, so if we're being real, Hicks probably just got a pity get out of heaven for free for now card from God that day. There also was a picture that showed the extremely disheveled face of Hicks after the race. This is the face of victory, and also being drunk, cramping from rat poison, and probably contracting salmonella from unpasteurized eggs. Oh shit. After his nap, Felix would be 4th to complete the race, only behind Gertrude, the illegal French, and Arthur Newton, who did nothing funny the entire race, so I didn't talk about him. In 9th place was Len, which considering he had to run an extra 2 miles in this race, because of the dogs, is a pretty impressive achievement. And then there was Frederick Loers. Now while initially he tried to write off his whole car thing as a big joke, the officials were not too impressed, so he received a ban from the Olympics. You know, I think unlike most of my videos, I can actually pull out a moral from this story, which is drink water. Also, a little bonus, after Felix's performance in this event, he was funded by the Cuban government to go participate in the 1906 Olympics in Athens. But the second he landed in Italy, he went completely missing, during which literally no one knows what he was up to. And this caused everyone in Cuba to think that he died, and he even got a funeral and an obituary, only for him to show up a couple months later with no explanation of what he got up to in Italy. Anyway, that was the 1904 Olympic Marathon.
Yo, what's up? If there's one thing we humans love doing, it's getting high. Every single ancient culture has their own way of getting faded, and it's something we continue to do into the modern day. But if you think humans are the only ones that like to get blasted, you'd be mistaken, because a lot of other animals have shown their need for speed. So much so that I figured I would just make a tier list to rank what's the best way to get high in the wild. The first animal on this list is the lemur, which is probably a surprise to nobody because it already looks like a crackhead monkey. Say you're a lemur from Madagascar who's bored on a Friday night. What's a guy to do, right? Well, lucky for you, you have nature's finest narcotic crawling all over the forest, the millipede. See, the millipede secretes a toxin called benzoquinine and cyanide, which gets these lemurs extremely blasted. Specifically, it causes the lemurs to start salivating profusely and act generally inebriated. Unfortunately, the thing about eating cyanide to get high is it's cyanide, so the lemurs have to make sure not to eat too much. Overall, I'm thinking a solid F tier. Honestly, I think if I was a lemur, I'd just stay sober at that point. Next, we have something you've probably already heard of. It's catnip, baby. Catnip is to cats like weed is to people. It won't really make your cat addicted, right? But it'll just provide him with a fun time. And apparently the effects of catnip on cats is pretty similar to weed. It just generally makes them calmer. These similarities to weed made me wonder if catnip can actually be smoked by humans. And after reading some forum posts from some pretty bored stoner in 2009, the general consensus seems that you might get high, but you definitely will get nauseous. Overall, I'm thinking a solid S tier for cats, and compared to a lot of other stuff humans smoke, a B tier for humans. Next, we have the Australian wallaby that eats opium. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, technically it eats poppy seeds, which have the opium in them, but yeah. Also, did you know if you eat a poppy seed bagel and then take a drug test, you'll actually come back positive for codeine because of the opium in poppy seeds? Anyway, this is a solid B tier. And finally, we have the animal that was the reason I decided to make this video in the first place. The caribou. So the caribou have been observed looking for a magic mushroom to get high. The specific magic mushroom they eat is called the fly agaric mushroom. And let me tell you, this shroom isn't all sunflower and rainbows because while it does get the caribou high, some other side effects include nausea, vomiting, dizziness, delirium, seizures, and hallucinations. There is a workaround to all these horrible side effects though. Once a caribou finishes his high and urinates, the piss still contains the psychoactive drug of the magic mushroom while having filtered out all the less than desirable toxins that have caused this to happen. As a result, other caribous often fight to drink that pee because drinking the pee means you can get all the benefits of the magic mushroom without all the downsides. But caribous are not the only one trying to get their hands on this pee. That's right, you know them, you love them. It's the Russians. Specifically the Sami shamans who lived in Siberia. Before they found out about vodka, their preferred drink of choice was actually caribou piss. Overall, I'm thinking solid F tier for the deers eating the mushrooms. But the caribou piss infused with the magic mushrooms can be a solid B tier, maybe even A tier depending on how palatable the piss is. And that's about it. I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking and subscribing. Also check out my live streams. I'll be streaming here every single week. And yeah, that's about it. Bye.